a crystic light, a crystalline light. That actually I felt like as it shook me to the point of complete stillness, it was also stillness, fullness, and it almost like shook me back together again. So why I say that is because even in my physical body, when I was traveling outside of it, was going through grand mal seizures because of the plant affecting my body. My muscles themselves in my physical body was also being shook to the point like I was shaking for like 2 days of just having seizures. But when the body shakes like that, and I mean, we can recognize this too, if we shake our body furiously, sometimes residue of energy can come off and like emotions can come off and densities can come off when we shake. But why I want to say that is because it almost shook me awake and shook me back to fullness and shook me back into togetherness, because it's almost like whatever traumas caused my soul to be fragmented got shaken off so that all the parts of me could come back together again.
Hello, thank you for tuning in. My name is Nella, and welcome to my podcast, ETHEREALITY. Today's guest is Sarah Snow. The way that she details her experience dying and entering into another realm is so well spoken. I'm excited to share it with you guys today. And also, before we get started, Sarah and I were chatting about a synchronicity that was pretty interesting that we end up diving into a lot more depth within the rest of the podcast, but I want to share it with you guys first.
When I learned about the name of your channel, that was wild to me because, so my name is Sarah Snow, but my first name is Snow, also Sarah, because I was born on a snowstorm. But then over the last couple of years, I kept getting this vision of this name, which was Etherea. And that's why I gave you that picture of me from Mexico that said Etherea. But it's like the ethers speaking through me. But it's this name Etherea. And then when I saw your ether reality, I was like, oh, this is amazing, because it's the same frequency of the channel that came through a couple of years ago. So I just felt like a really big synchronicity there. And I was like, oh, whoa, like this is so cool, you know?
Yes, it was really neat when you sent me that email with that picture. And I was just like, whoa, yes. And I mean, the second I met you, I was just like, there's a connection here. Listening to your story and chatting with you, it's just like, oh my gosh, yes. And I was so excited to connect with you today and have another conversation. So this is going to be amazing, I'm sure. Let's allow that channel to open and to speak through us today and flesh out all that needs to be talked about in a way that's going to impact my audience as much as it possibly could.
Amazing.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us about your near-death experience?
Okay, so my near-death experience happened about now almost 8 years ago. And it happened from actually being in contact and consuming without my consciousness, although I understand now that it was part of this synchronistic plan, a plant that is called water hemlock. So this plant is actually one of the most poisonous plants in North America, and it grows wildly, and it's part of the carrot family plants. So there's a lot of lookalikes that happen in this genre of plants. So there's angelica root that looks very similar to water hemlock. And so when I was on this journey of working with plants in the forests of British Columbia, I was harvesting women's wellness plants. So I was working with a plant called angelica root. That one particular day when I went into the marshlands to harvest this plant, I had an understanding that this plant was angelica, and I made a decoction with it. But after taking the decoction, it turned out that this plant was actually contaminated with a lookalike plant called water hemlock. So I actually harvested the plant angelica. It was growing in a low-lying marshland. So the area around the plant, we believe, was water hemlock growing in its vicinity. So the root actually took up the poison of the hemlock. So it ended up being a decoction, which is basically like a mixture of water and the plant together that had both the qualities of angelica root and water hemlock. When I had this decoction, I didn't know my interpretation was that I was just harvesting Angelica. I went up to the top of the hill to meditate and do yoga, as I did every single day. And when I took this plant, I knew that automatically something was terribly wrong. So when I took this plant, I started to get double vision. I felt so sick. And then what happened was I was sitting on top of a ravine. There's a trail that goes back to my trailer. I decided to basically jump off this ravine and slide down to get back to where my trailer was. When I got back to the trailer, my body knew something was wrong. I felt terribly sick. And so what I made myself do is I threw up in a plastic bag and I tied that plastic bag. And I was looking through the plant book to see if there was any contraindications to the Angelica root. So I was looking through the plant book, and then all of a sudden I saw the Angelica and I was reading nothing. And then intuitively, I felt called to turn the page. And on the next page was information about water hemlock. And when I read that, it said in bold, 2 drops of the resin of this plant can kill a man in 15 minutes. And everything in my body just totally dropped. And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. So I took my bag of vomit, I left the trailer, and I went down to the main house to where my mentor and then another woman was actually there by the house. And I just told them, I was like, pointed to the book, and I just said, you need to call 911. You need to call 911. And they're like, no, you're fine. It's okay. You should just come in and have some tea. And I was like, no. And I pointed at the book, and they were like, oh my gosh. And then within about 10-15 minutes, I was already having seizures. And I projectile vomited basically in their house. And I told them, don't touch anything, because I didn't really know how contaminated whatever my vomit or the decoction was. It's a miracle that I ended up getting to the hospital from where I was. And when I recall this story, there's a lot of details missing, but just for the sake of our conversation, I'm just going to cut it short. When I was actually transferred from one ambulance to the other, I lost breathing for about 1 minute, but then I had this immediate awareness that I was just moving my vessel, like my consciousness was moving from one vessel to something else. So when I finally actually left my body, I went through like a dissolution of the elements. I could almost feel like every element, like earth, wind, air, fire, was like leaving my physical vessel. Okay, so then it turned into ether in the end. So the first part is earth, is like my body felt extremely heavy. So heavy to the point where it felt like lead, like almost like the earth was taking me back home again. And so I lost feeling. So what this plant does is a circuitoxin that shuts off the peripheral nervous system to the extremities. So what happens is your legs go numb, your arms go numb, and eventually it kills you by suppressing your lungs to the point where you can no longer breathe, your diaphragm stops working, and then you suffocate to death. And that's when I lost breathing for about a minute as I was transferred from one ambulance to the next. But you feel your body first as lead. And then after that, I felt like my eyes and my throat and my tongue drying out. So it's almost like fire, like burning away the liquid, and then the water leaving my body. Like the tangible sensation of water felt like it was leaving my body, like I was drying up inside. And then once that happened, I lost my breath. So it was like the air was being taken. And then after that, I felt like when I came out of my body, I went into this space that was on top of my physical body, and I hung out there for a bit. But then from there, even the ether outside of my body dissolved. And when that dissolved, the ether, I went into this dark space, almost like the space if all the lights were shut off and there was nothing that you can see or feel. It was complete darkest blackest hole that you could ever be in. And there was some sort of like peaceful bliss that came over me in that state of darkness. And when I was in that state of darkness, I just felt so easeful and so peaceful, but I also felt like nothing existed. There was nothing. There was just absolutely nothing. But in that, it was almost like that nothing was also everything, because there was no physical vessel to hold my consciousness anymore. And thus I felt like I was part of that everything in that space of nothingness.
When you were in that space of nothingness, did you have any conscious thought or remembering of having just been in your body as Sarah?
Yes. So I still had actual consciousness that I had just came from my body. So I
Cool.
still have memory of the whole process. So in the blackness, there was nothing, but this quality of feeling at home almost too, in that nothingness with everything. So it's a very hard space to maybe put words to. We think with our mind in a polarized way, like darkness is nothing, but how could it then be everything if you're saying it's nothing? But it's almost like nothing for the soul to worry about or to connect with or to attach with. But everything with regards to where I am actually, where we're all actually from. And what I want to say about that is there was this continuity between the darkest, blackest blackness that then I could see at the end of the blackness, there was this white light that then as soon as I connected with that white light, it shone on me. And when it shone on me, it shook me. And I would say it was like a rapturous vibrational shaking into aliveness. And when I speak it, when I close my eyes, I feel like that's the only way that I can really engage with the way that space is that there's this nothingness, but also immense everythingness. At the end of the darkest tunnel is this immense light. And that immense light shone on me and shook me to a space where I was totally still because I was vibrating so fast. So, what I like to say is like all the polarity that we believe is in our 3D reality becomes one again. So, the fastest thing is the slowest thing, is the darkest thing, is the lightest thing. The movement is the stillness. You become shook to the point where you're still because you're so awake, because you're so alive.
That reminds me of Taoism. The result of something short equals something long. The only reason we have something valued is because we perceive it to have a higher value, and that higher value equates to something of lesser value. It is equal in the sense that without value, we wouldn't have a lesser value. Without something long, we wouldn't have something short. Without something short, we wouldn't have something long. It is a oneness. Everything is complete. All the polar opposites are simply opposite because it is only a part of the whole. That's something that I learned from diving into the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, the way of the Tao, to be in the flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is our egos compartmentalize our experience, right? Good, bad, light, dark, fast,
Mm-hmm.
slow, and holds on to a lot of details. The details aren't really important when we let go and we let go into the space that everything is existing as one as it is. God is in everything and always, but there's no then need to compartmentalize or categorize the experience after we let go of this judgment. And the body loves to judge because the body is a compartment in this
Mm-hmm.
reality.
Absolutely.
When we get rid of that density and that compartmentalization, we realize that God is all. And then we can simultaneously experience our existence and our reality outside of the way that the ego defines it. So that's what I experienced in that space. But it wasn't the end of that journey, also, is that I had this rapturous experience with the light that I will actually call now, because of my other experiences, a Christic light, a crystalline light. Mhm. That actually I felt like as it shook me to the point of complete stillness, it was also stillness, fullness, and it almost like shook me back together again. Why I say that is because even in my physical body, when I was traveling outside of it, was going through grand mal seizures because of the plant affecting my body. My muscles themselves in my physical body was also being shook to the point like I was shaking for like 2 days of having seizures. But when the body shakes like that, and I mean, we can recognize this too, if we shake our body furiously, sometimes residue of energy can come off and like emotions can come off and densities can come off when we shake. But why I want to say that is because it almost shook me awake and shook me back to fullness and shook me back in togetherness, because it's almost like whatever traumas caused my soul to be fragmented got shaken off so that all the parts of me could come back together again.
I had an experience during a sound bath that was somewhat similar to that. So what happened, if you don't mind me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was laying there, Shavasana, at the end of a yoga session, and the instructor started playing the crystal sound bowls. I went into a meditative state, and without recognizing it, I had connected with the music in a way. It was almost like my spirit lifted. I felt this vibration that was just expanded in the space that I was laying in, like above and around me. And I could feel the vibrations. It was almost like every molecule in my body had like broke apart and I was like
Mhm.
just particles in this space. And it felt so liberating. It felt so free. And then as soon as the sound bath was ending, at the same speed in which the vibrations of sound were quieting, the particles, what it felt like, the expanded spirit that I was experiencing, all kind of contracted and materialized into this physical form. And it felt like weighted. It was almost abrupt, and I didn't quite recognize what was happening. And so my friend had described it to me. He had said that when they are purifying metals, they heat it all up so that it's all liquid and expanded, and it allows the impurities to raise to the surface to where they can be scraped off and then it purified. And then after it's been cleansed, it solidifies into its solid form, now having been able to release those things.
Yes, yes, yes. Like my whole body is like, yes, when you're speaking. And I'm so happy that you shared that because it's like your cellular structures get exposed to a vibration, right? And especially because you're in Shavasana, you're in a surrendered state, which then allows a receptivity, right, for the cells to take in a new form of vibration. But when the new form of vibration lands within the body, in the soma, then all of the densities that cannot actually house themselves within the cellular structure, they dissolve or they're brought up to the surface in order to be purified, cleansed, brought to awareness, and then taken out in some way. So, yeah, when you're explaining that, the frequency of the sound bowl was vibrating your cells to a space of openness and receptivity and allowing density to come and be shaken off of you. It's exactly like that. But then imagine that there is no then note frequency anymore. It's like the harmony of the universe or the next level of all the frequencies converging into one, which is what I call the divine light of light consciousness. It's everything all at once. It's all that is. Imagine every note of every song bowl that ever existed on this whole planet playing together at once. Essentially, it's a conscious harmony that when we die, we get to return home to the universal song. And when that universal song plays, our cells remember that song that takes them home. And all of the other disarrayed frequencies are non-harmonic frequencies, which can come from thoughts, emotions, traumas, in our forgetfulness, and in our fear. It can be brought to awareness again and be made one again with the conscious light of the truth, of the divine spirit of what is. That frequency became embodied within me. I had this experience where that light shook me to the point of complete serenity, like to the point of complete stillness, where there was nothing to do, nowhere to go. There's just everything all at once here now, but a welcoming and receptivity of that. So I'll just share a little bit more about this experience that happened after that, is that I actually, in that space, had consciousness and saw everyone who loved me, loves me, whoever would love me. And I think we talked about this the last time, all at the same time. But remember, the universal now is all that is. So now is the past, present, and future all at the same time. But it was like immense love in whatever form my body could actually recall and have consciousness to that I could feel in this present moment in that now. And then, like the snap of your fingers, like all these emanations of love were felt simultaneously. And that love vacuumed me back into my body. And when the love vacuumed me back into my body and I opened my eyes, all that I had was love. It was like radiating from every pore of my body. And that brings us back to the other conversation where when I could see everybody around me, I felt like love was shooting out of every pore of my eyes and everything was just perfect. I mean, as it always was, but maybe we can't see that because the densities that were around me in thought and emotion and in frequency in my cells or whatever. And then when the people were looking at me, they gave me pen and paper I wanted to write, and I wrote just love. Like, I love. And that was it. Like, I love. Like, the ego part of me could recognize that that was all that is. It wasn't like I love my mom, or I love you, or I love that I'm alive, or I love anything. There's no attachment to the love or reasoning to the love. It's just that I am love. Love, I am love. I associate that frequency, that godlike frequency, with the frequency of immense unconditional love, truly. And so I feel like that space that I went, I came back, thank God, thank you, love, with that gift renewed again in my heart, that all that is always here with us, that it's all perfect. Now in my life, my goal is to stay in a space of understanding and compassion and awareness so that that immense love can remain within me. Because this 3D world is like being thrown into the game where there's like a competition of our vessels. That's what I would say. A competition that's like our body's a vessel, but it's a competition between fear and love. Love always wins, but this competition, sometimes we get interjected with this fear, but we do again have to surrender. And like you were doing in the sound bath, remember that the frequency of that universal song is always there. And when we remind ourselves of that stillness, right, God's love can shine through our being again. And so I guess how my life has changed from then to now is that I know within my cells that I'm connected to the source of God's love always. That's the real knowing that changes this internal belief system that I never had before I died. That literally my soul is on a destined path of a mirrored existence that continues to show me where those polarities are that need to be dissolved. And so why I'm saying that is because when we all have these moments of hardship and suffering, we can actually choose to look at these situations as a way for God to try to bring us home, to allow us to see the beauty in whatever suffering we have, even up until death, showing us a new form of humility, grace, and compassion to try to burn that judgment. Like our sufferings are trying to burn the judgment that we carry so that we can come back into wholeness. But if we
I
adopt
love
that
that.
perspective, then we can really come home because we're not then avoiding or resisting
Hmm.
the journey of this density that we have here. We're embracing and we're embodying it. And then God's love can speak through us tangibly. We could feel it. So it's like, thank you for showing me all that's still left to burn. And I would say that the light that I saw at the end of that black tunnel is like a white holy fire.
You're not the first person I've heard to explain it like fire. I specifically love that you had said burn the judgment,
Mhm.
because that goes back to the Tao again, is the judgments that we make are always incomplete. Because, like I was saying, if we perceive something to be short, there's something that's long. If we perceive something to be dark, there's something that's light. There's always going to be that illusion of polarity, right? But if we are to recognize that there is no good and bad, we recognize that triggers that feel bad when we're experiencing them are illuminating the path to wholeness, and recognizing discomfort and triggers and stuff as an opportunity to come back to wholeness is basically what you're saying when you say to burn the judgments.
Mhm. Because,
And
like, to hold on to a judgment is to hold on to the form of the illusion.
yeah,
So, when we hold on to any judgment that we believe is true, even the idea that we know that something is a factor, it's true, is still binding us to an understanding that we can proclaim something is, and that is a form of our ego judging something. And sometimes judgment is helpful when it comes to discerning our physical reality, because that's the way the matrix is formed. But if we were returning to the divine love, the divine truth beyond this form, surrendering ourselves to be able to let go of this form is helpful, right? For us to remember where we're going and where we come from outside of this chosen incarnation in this physical density, in this body. So we need it to remain here. We need it to understand here. We need it to understand our given society. But there is this form of like our soul really understanding and being embodied with this truth outside the self, outside the ego, that can give us great peace. It can give us a great sense of knowing. And I think that and feel that when we know that, we connect to our destiny again. And our destiny is not a given place. Our destiny is accepting the present for all that it is now, knowing that everything can be accessed here and now. Whatever destiny that we think we need to be is still just an illusion. If we just embrace the destiny is for us in this moment, it shall be. And I know that might seem a little bit difficult to logically understand, but it's actually like if we let go of the mind, then we let go of the judgment that binds us into falsehood, that believes that we need to be something or we should be something. And then we become whole again, and that we know then our purpose.
In
So
that sense
people
that we're
that
not.
don't understand, that's probably because they're trying to understand with the mind so much as just letting the words come to them in a space where they can feel the truth of their nature now. It's about feeling to know your heart, and that feeling to know your heart creating your destiny.
Yes, absolutely. Did you try to tell anyone about your experience?
Oh, I didn't need to tell anybody about my experience because there were people around me also that were on the journey, like with my family that came and they could see and feel, but it was organic. So it's not like I went to have to go and tell everyone. It's the nature of my being shifted so much that when people ask me, oh my God, I heard what happened to you. What happened to you? I was like, everything happened and it's good. It's perfect. It's all good now. And so people would ask me what happened to me in that near-death experience. And so it ended up being just friends of conversations, just creating a movement. It kind of spread like fire almost. I told somebody about the experience. Also, my family members that I told, there was a lot of miraculous things that happened within the structure and the dynamics of those relationships during that time. So even when I left the body, I would leave some stories out, but essentially I went to go visit my sister in Korea to tell her while I was out of my body. And then she was in an elevator and the elevator started shaking, like the elevator was having a seizure. She didn't know that I was in the hospital having seizures. So she told the lady in the elevator, it feels like this elevator is having a seizure. And then later she got the phone call from my mom that I was in the hospital having grand mal seizures, but I went to go visit her. And so when she came back to the hospital bed, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're okay. And I just come out of my space. And then when I finally had the breathing tube taken out of me, I mean, there's some space in between these incidences, but when I finally had the breathing tube taken out, I said, did you see me? Because I came to visit you. So there was a lot of things happening that were miraculous, not only just for me, but for them as well. So the story spread organically, but also very quickly. And then I was asked to speak at different engagements and then yoga studios. And then people told people. And then so I ended up being on tour for 7 years. So
Wow.
I was 29 and I'm 37 now. I'm 38 this year. The last 7 years before I birthed my daughter, I was just moving from place to place, speaking to people that God had me speak to. Like I just followed the flow of my life. I let go of everything else. I just went to the places my heart told me to go to, met the people that I was needing to speak to, told them, shared with them organically, whatever it needed to be shared, not even about my near death experience, but just communing and creating friendships and connections that just continued to lead me on this journey. What I do now is all over the world in helping people recognize the truth of who they are and what they came here to do and be. And when I say that, it's not about us doing something, it's about us being something to the point of loving what we are doing. We become the gift that we give other people, and that becomes a part of our doing. But the goal is not to do your purpose, and the goal is not to create it or to grow it. It's actually that we just become ourselves so much that that happens naturally and organically. So I feel like part of my dharma is to do that, just be myself and speak the things that I'm asked to speak, but also to encourage other people to do the same within their own energetic blueprint of what they came here to share.
I actually heard recently that your purpose is not a destination, it's the journey.
For sure. So that's what I mean about destiny being now. Our purpose is to be so fully present in the now and so embodied in a space of non-judgmental, compassionate humility that we radiate the gift that God gave us. And each one of us has her own unique signature of how we do that on purpose. So that we can truly be that. So we can be that puzzle piece. And everybody's a puzzle piece to the grand vision of us becoming one again with each other. Everyone's story, positive or negative, right? Because it doesn't exist, has an implication to another soul when we share that authentically, to allow a witnessing or a mirroring of whatever concern or joy needs to be seen fully in order to bring us back home together. I know that sounds really confusing, but that's the way in which we are meant to be here, to mirror each other's processes in good or bad or happiness and sadness, so that we remember who we are beyond the identity of the ego, that you and I are actually the same entity speaking to each other, but we have different physical forms, and we have a difficult time seeing that because we see, right, the fragmentation, the polarity of you being you and I being I. But if we dissolve that and we sink deeper, actually your consciousness and my consciousness are interacting from the same form, but we're trying to see something clearly for each other, which is why we're in this conversation. So we're mirroring an opportunity to bring deeper awareness to our reality.
It feels so complete. We're very early into this conversation. And just recognizing the wholeness of all, the oneness of each polarity, and how you had said we're all puzzle pieces, looking at it from that perspective and like stepping into that, being the observer versus the like outward participator. It feels like nothing needs to be said.
Words convolute the simplicity of the connection between all beings.
Which is amazing to experience this right now and to observe it, to feel this, but also counterproductive to a podcast episode.
Our whole society is built up on the doing aspect. So we have to talk about the doing aspect.
Yes.
But if we dissolve the doing aspect, then we're just here. And it's a joy.
And it's completely just pure contentedness.
Mm-hmm. Right? And how blissful it is to remain in that space where there's nothing to do, there's nowhere to go, there's nothing to achieve, to become your destiny, to become your purpose. It's actually right here in the form of love unconditional. But when we are sitting in stillness and have an understanding of that love unconditional, then we are led, we are compelled, and we are passionate in what we are. That leads to our doing. It leads us to do things, but out of sheer joy and from a space of enthusiastic need almost. So when I say this, it's almost like our service to one another comes from this place. It comes from a space of not that I want to help, not that I need to help, not that I want to save or that this person needs saving, but from a space of true quiet awareness of I see you, you see me. Look at this game that we're playing, but what can we create together that's fun, that allows us to be fully who we are meant to be? And when I say that, it's also a form of being outside a projected reality and identity that we've been told to be by our family or by school or by the things that we judge ourselves by. So it's very difficult to explain it with English because English is a very compartmentalized egoic language. But when we dissolve these aspects of trying to do and become something that we believe is successful or for our path, and we just end up shooting the shit and talking about whatever we want to talk about truly with our heart open, then there's a synchronicity that happens within the consciousness between two souls, and there's a healing that's taken place, a mirroring that's taken place, like I repeated again, of something that you and I are needing to engage on to learn something about our compassion, humility, grace, just some aspect about our condition of being human and why we chose that, so that we can fall back in or rise back into love.
If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please hit that like button and subscribe. Also, if you've enjoyed my content before, or maybe you're new here, but you like it, drop a comment and let me know you're here. I would love to get to know my audience. Thank you for listening, and let's get back to the content. Yes, absolutely. And I have to say that I don't believe that I've ever truly embodied that perspective of the oneness to the extent in which I have just now. I've not had a near-death experience, but I feel like I've been able to conceptualize. There's a difference between when somebody tells you something and you're like, yeah, that makes sense, versus when you have a personal experience with it. The difference between the analytical mind versus the open heart experience. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here and having this conversation with me and helping me get more outside of that ego, that analytical part of my experience, and more into that open heart oneness of all things that I've heard about and talked about and thought about hundreds of thousands of times, but have yet to really touch on that tangible open heart experience.
You already have that. That's why you can recognize, which is why when we speak, there's a part of your soul that's smiling when there's certain things said. And that's because you're already there. Like, so here's the thing that I want to say is we have this concept of, remember I was saying past, present, and future being different periods of time. So we think in my life now, I have yet to experience this and this and this. But remember your consciousness. Outside of the timelines of your physical body, you've already experienced what we've already all experienced now, but you don't recall it because you're compartmentalizing your experience to your conscious mind that only exists in your body now as you. But when I speak and when other people that have been there have spoken to you, you can feel it on such a deep, tangible level because you've been there and you are there. But it's about dissolving this identity of the way that you perceive your reality so that you can feel it more fully. That's the embodiment. And when you trust that feeling and the knowing, then we don't need to talk anymore. That's the point. What I'm trying to make is that, like you made, that there's no words that need to be said for the communion of our true selves. Or when we look at somebody that we have a deep connection with, when we don't say anything and we look into their eyes or we feel their presence, there's nothing really that needs to be said, but there's this sense of like love that can exist. But it can happen with anyone or anything because it's all made of the same frequency. It's all woven together with that love. And that's what I mean. Like, we just think that we can't, we just think that we're not yet able, but you're already there. Like your spirit has already died and been in another body than this one and will die and will, like, so we all, not just you, not just me. I realized when I died that I had always died and I've always lived throughout all of those physical deaths, right? So like death in this physical body happens like recycling, like it just continues to recycle itself. It continues to transverse through these different layers of density. But in the end, our spirits never really die. And we just keep living this over and over again. And we can live it as heaven or we can live it as hell. But once the holy fire is within you, you can experience as heaven. Or if you don't recognize that it's part of you, then you can experience it as hell, because it's the way in which we're perceiving our sufferings that creates that realm.
The interview that I did right before this, Lindsay was talking about if we were to take a cold shower, right? You can get in the shower and you can shiver and clench up, having a horrible experience, and you could be causing physical trauma and stress to your body because of the way that you're perceiving it. Or you could focus on the breath, be the observer, like, yes, this is cold, but there's no harm coming to my body right now. Like, I'm in a safe space, not clench up, and allow yourself to actually receive the physical benefits of having the cold shower. These circumstances still exactly the same. You're still just simply in a cold shower. One situation, you're choosing stress and suffering, and another one, you're choosing to focus on the life force within you, focus on the breath, receiving the benefits of the discomfort that you're enduring. It's really just about perspective.
It's either hell in this vessel or heaven in this vessel, but it's dependent on the thoughts, emotions, perceptions, right? That are either aligned with love or aligned with fear. But in both of those situations, we are just here. So it's actually a full acceptance of all of it. So even if you go into the cold shower and you say, man, I'm super stressed and this is super cold, as soon as you identify that you're super stressed, it likely will dissolve. So even if we express fully how we feel with all of our resistances to whatever is, we let them all out, and we don't allow any space for those densities, right, to become embodied. So say, for example, I have perceptions, or I have judgments, or I have an aversion or resistance to the cold, but I yell about it all. That actually, like a baby crying, would not impact my physiology, in the sense that, like, I wouldn't hold on to any of those resistances and I could just release it. And then I would come back to being like, okay, but I'm still here, right? I think the reason why this is coming up is because it's not about choosing, I need to be great about this situation all the time and it's only love. It's like, be real with how you are, how you feel, like be authentic with it, but recognize nothing is forever and it's all part of this illusion. But the more we let go into that, the more we let go into that authenticity, it kind of like dissolves itself. And then we come back to the neutrality or base point again. But then when we understand that base point neutrality, then we still can exist on heaven on earth, because we don't let that fear bind us into a space of like chronic tension. Chronic tension actually comes from repressed thoughts and emotions associated with resistance. So I think the reason why I want to say this is because I want to say to anybody that's listening, feel what you need to feel. Without judgment, without resistance, feel what you need to feel. Even if it's not happy thoughts, even if it's not heavenly, feel what you need to feel with your full being. And then those things will start to dissolve and your life will become more neutral, and then thus will become more positive and heavenly, but naturally, organically, not like in a weird bypassing or like need to be positive about the experience. Embrace the cold shower, could be extremely cold and you could be stressed about it, and then let that thought go.
That's a very important point to make.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that you said that.
Just
But
because we have a lot of like of that bypassing culture that says, okay, yes, we can be heaven on earth and it's just about perspective, and we can have hell. But to say that somebody's perspective is negative, we're like, oh, they have a negative perspective on life that's creating this hell. It's not that, it's just that they haven't embodied, right, the ability to really receive it. There's just a form of resistance still in their body associated with how they're feeling. So embrace how you really feel without judgment on yourself. That's hard to do in our society, because our society tells us that we should be a certain way. So if you go down the street and you scream on top of your lungs because you want to, people are going to judge you. But that person is not repressed. And in some ways, they're free. So I am going to say that, like a baby crying when it's upset. we accept that it's okay because they're a baby, but why can't we accept that because we're adults? There's a need for that expression also.
Absolutely. You were on the spiritual journey before this had happened to you. From what I can tell, you never doubted the validity of it.
I didn't doubt exactly where I was meant to be and how I was meant to do it. I just became good with how God created me. Like I kind of lost this idea of like what I think success should be. I lost that. I just was just being myself. I also had felt like I did die in that space because I was so tremendously different after I came back. When I came back with all my pieces, that identity that I carried as Sarah before I died, it was gone. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I actually feel like I know that I'm here, but then sometimes I had questioned, did I actually die in the sense of like, this is a new reality for me completely? Does that make sense? I know that I had a near death experience and that I died in some way to my identity because I came back a totally shifted consciousness. But sometimes I think to myself, I'm in heaven already. Now, this is it. There's so much miraculousness around and through me all the time, even in my suffering, even in my joy. Like, I believe that heaven is, I'm living it. Like, I crossed over the bridge. So I died, but I also didn't. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you
I
know what I'm
do.
trying to
Yeah.
say?
I think what it comes down to is ultimately the definition of death.
Yes. I think it's a rebirthing experience, is what I call it. A spiritual rebirth is like rebirthing myself again to a new form and identity, but nothing actually died. But I do feel like I died. The identity died, I guess if you can die to an identity, but
Right.
my physical body didn't die. I'm still in this vessel. My identity may have died, but do you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I think to myself, I died to that reality that I thought was just 3D. Like I died to the sleepy self that I was before, or the self that was really tied up in a lot of judgments, repression, depression, ailments that were coming from my mind. When I died, I couldn't access that place anymore. I couldn't even access the fear. It wasn't there anymore.
Did that last for a certain period of time and start to fade and you kind of
No, I'm still
no, you
there.
still a lot of people have experiences like that when they come back from their near death experience, but typically that open door tends to start to close and they start to kind of come back to themselves, but always with a transformed perspective.
Hmm.
But it's amazing to hear you say that you came back a version of you that has been maintained
Hmm.
throughout ever
Hmm.
since.
Hmm. Like I still experience, like everybody experiences on this planet, hardships,
Mhm.
suffering, challenges, disappointments, because my ego is still intact for me to speak and for me to be here. But from a consciousness standpoint and from an internal knowingness, it never leaves me. Never. Like, I guess to give you an example is before I died, I was afraid of things like afraid of driving, afraid of connecting with people deeply. I was even afraid to look people dead in the eye. I was afraid to follow my dreams. I was afraid to travel. I was afraid of money. I was afraid of all these things that even though I was on a spiritual path and a seeker and was studying plants and went to school for nutrition and did all these things, I still had this innate fear, anxiety dwelling within my cellular structure. When I died and came back, that was wiped. Like I was saying, a fullness of my being came back and that was completely gone. It's like almost like fear's frequency couldn't live in my cellular structure anymore. That has been maintained. But I still experience challenges, disappointments, and I can still integrate and speak with my ego sometimes, and I can catch myself. But deep down, there's this tangible knowing that I'm with God. So it doesn't go away. But in that tangible relationship with God that is with me, I do feel like that old identity that was bound by fear did die. So I do think that I died to that version of self so I could enter heaven. And I did cross a bridge in some ways. So sometimes I think I'm already dead. I hope that you can get that in some way. And I've been fortunate enough to realize that I'm dead so that I can be one with God again. So now I'm reborn into this life that is like heaven, which doesn't negate me from experiencing challenges. It doesn't negate me from experiencing resistances, but inside I know I'm already in heaven.
I love that.
It's not in some far off place. It's inside of the now, associated with a timeline with regards to my relationship with God.
You were mentioning the fact that time is not linear.
Yeah.
And I loved what you had said in reflection on that, because something that I like to bring up to people is I feel like the concept of past lives is framed in a way in which it is not necessarily
Limited.
doing it justice for what
It's
it
just limited.
actually is. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
What I think would be a better use of language to talk about the concept would be parallel.
Yes.
Because if the past and present and the future all simultaneously exist, then whatever past lives that we are living are actually currently simultaneously existing with whatever we're experiencing right now.
100%.
And so when you said that you're already there,
yeah, and so are you. We're already dead.
we're already
And we're already
there.
living. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
already there. Yeah.
Recognizing that and knowing that you're always connected to that part of you that is outside of this incarnation, we already know. We're already on the other side. We're already here. We're already there. We are all everywhere and nowhere and everything all at once.
And
And
when you're
it's
speaking that, I have literally all of my cells in my body just shaking. You know, like when you get the goosebumps, but that those truth bumps, like in my cells, this is also something that after I had that experience, my whole body lights up from the inside. And I'm sure you experience that too. It's like my bones are shaking and vibrating with truth.
exactly. And so, like, one thing that I like to tell people to help when they're navigating struggles is you are connected to the part of yourself that is already in the future and has already resolved this conflict. So there's a part of you that already knows the solution. You just have to get quiet with yourself and not try to force or make things happen, rather to accept that you don't have all the information right now, that it will come to you at the time in which you do need it, and not to agonize over this conflict that you're dealing with, and to just trust the natural unfolding. More conversations need to be had, more things need to transpire in your environment, data needs to come to you to get you to the point in which you have enough information, enough data, you find that
You're
future
so good.
part of
Yeah.
yourself that already knows, you get to
Yes.
that point in the timeline, and
Yeah.
then you can make the decision and everything will unfold as it is designed to.
Yes. Yes.
Is so helpful
Yes. And
in
sometimes, like you were
navigating
saying, the data
conflict.
comes to help our egos trust
Mhm.
because our minds need to feel satisfied in some way to then trust where we're flowing, where we're going. But as this trust and belief with God strengthens on the inside, the less data you need, the more felt perception impacts, the more felt knowing impacts the way in which you perceive reality, our perception of reality, right? Until there's this only divine trust, that perception creates heaven on earth. But we need data until we can trust. So we search for data, we search for answers, we search for near death experiences, we search for people that believe they have the truth until we give up the fear, trusting the knowing that we're already simultaneously dying and alive and living at the same time. Accept that we're always dying, but accept that throughout all the deaths that we have, throughout all the timelines that we have, throughout all the parallel realities of the identities that we need to die to finally realize that this is heaven coming through our vessel on earth. We can forgive each other and ourselves for the misperception of the illusion that has impacted our ability to dwell in peace and serenity here. This does not negate that we have challenges and we have suffering. That's the point of challenges. That's the point of suffering, to identify our resistances so clearly so we can't run away from the illusions that are plaguing us, that God wants us to see fully, so that we can come back to our divine purpose, which is to be our own unique blueprint of love. Never be afraid to recycle. You can look at recycling as the physical death of your body or death of the identity or the death of this moment. But don't be afraid of that, knowing that it's actually bringing you closer to your infinite life. Everything that we die to, everything that we move on from, every relationship that ends, negative relationship with self that ends, anything that ends is shedding something for a new beginning that is bringing us closer to the awareness that love has always been there and always will be.
Awakening is in the adversity. I feel like that's the next step of like my journey is embodying more of that.
Don't be afraid to share whatever you feel like you need to share, and don't judge it as good or bad or right or wrong, but just be it. And the right people, the people that are necessary for each other's missions, will come to the surface, will connect, will engage. And the other people that are not in that consciousness yet won't, and they'll feel resistance to it, but that's only because it's creating whatever ripples they need for their own awareness to then grow.
Absolutely.
And it's so simple in some ways, but also it's so difficult because this world is built on illusion, almost as if to stop consciousness from becoming aware.
This is giving me more of a broader understanding of the path of it all, the awakening of the planet.
Yeah.
And I like to say that what I do is talk to people about their near death experiences and spread awareness of the fact that we are more than these vessels. In doing that, it's shifting the collective consciousness.
Mhm.
It's helping people wake up. I open the eyes. The information coming through is the perspective changer. But that's the beginning of the journey.
You're the ether reality. You're the reality, the ether
Oh my
reality.
gosh, that's amazing.
And I'm etherea because we're all ethereal. You are channeling and helping people recognize the ether reality, the reality that sits as a parallel reality, a parallel timeline alongside the 3D density in this body. To remember that and to bring them back as one is part of our reawakening to the awareness of consciousness that God is with us in everything. But we die then to a physical identity because we can't hold on to that as we connect with the ether reality. And that's why when I saw you, I was like, holy dude, I'm supposed to talk on your channel. And also that picture, I'm just telling you, I'm showing you that that was coming through, that we are building, creating the ether reality through our conscious awareness and choices.
Right.
But if we don't have awareness of our consciousness, then what we create in the ether reality is artificial intelligence is all tied together. We create a world, confusion and hell, if we don't have the awareness. But if we have awareness, we can co-create with love a really amazing layered parallel reality for people that are awake so that we can really connect on the truth level, on the spiritual level.
And I feel like I've been on this journey of being that conduit
Yes.
of this information
Yes.
that is the initial eye opener, the beginning step to so many, being able to explore multiple different near death experiences. A lot of people like to journey through hundreds of them. And just in doing so, it creates broader perspective, more eye opening as you go along.
Mhm.
But I've been so immersed in that first step of the awakening and the broadening of the first step that it's amazing to actually consciously observe a furthering of that. For me to be this conduit, my furthering of my perspective in my journey from here on out, I feel like, given I take the time and intentionally integrate this, ultimately can have an even more profound impact.
As you do it, then your entire reality that you experience here will also shift because you are adopting a new form of awareness.
Right.
So, like, just like I
Absolutely.
said, heaven is on earth. Like, whatever engagements I'm having is on a perspective, that is like ethereal
Yeah.
because of the awareness that I had been able to be gifted during that experience, right?
Mhm.
But you are also doing the same thing. So you don't need a near-death experience to bring that awareness on. So having this conversation could also bring an awareness in you so that when people are moving deeper in their journeys, they have that synchronicity or the mirroring necessary to give them enough data to drop into
Right.
trust.
Right. Like you had your experience, right? Where you were in your body, the density of your body, and then you were out of your body into the
Hmm.
ethereal. And then the
Another
ethereal
experience.
dissolved into that oneness. You have given me in this conversation like a gift of that insight of experiencing that one step higher into that void, into the oneness and the nothingness that is allness. And taking that, the value that I just recognized out of that and bringing it in is like such a gift.
Yeah, because the thing is if we bring 3D density into the ether reality, we're just repeating the same illusion that our physical bodies are living. But as we integrate it into the ethereal reality, the heaven on earth, that all or nothing space, that God is love space, we can bring heaven on earth through the ether reality. We need the connection of spirit and matter in order to live the heaven on earth. So the ethereal reality, right? The
Mhm.
awareness outside of the body that you're bringing more data into is allowing people to cross that bridge over to heaven here on earth now in their bodies. But we need the ether reality in order to dream in that reality for us here on the physical plane. But if we don't have that connection with the all-knowing nothing and everything, God is love space, then we end up just bringing the 3D density into the ethereal reality. And that's the artificial intelligence that is now
And that's how we end up manifesting our worst
demise,
nightmares.
basically.
Yeah.
Yes, because the ether reality becomes full of the illusion of the density of the 3D reality, and the fifth dimensional frequency can actually be seated. But we need these spaces, right? Because
Absolutely.
we need a bridge. And for those that are listening that this makes no sense, is that it's okay, just let it be as it is. But the ones that do and it is making sense, there's a reason why you're watching that because it's a key, right? The ether reality is almost like the four-dimensional experience. 3D, 40, 50. I know people say that all the time and it's misused. But what I want to say is that it's not even about the density of the dimension or whatever. It's about bringing love that is unknown in our physical dimension into every circumstance that we have on this physical dimension so that we can ground in that heavenly reality here now. But how do you do that? By dropping and letting the identity dissolve, the identities that were built in resistance and fear, by releasing our authenticity, even if it comes out in the emotional realm of needing to express, cry, scream, yell, whatever you need to do, get that stuff out of you so that your physiology can be open and receptive again to more peace and serenity. It's just so funny that it just keeps coming through. It's not about spiritually bypassing this experience of being all roses and all good and all goodness. It's about being true. What does your soul need to express through this body in order to be totally transparent and free to let ourselves be and let ourselves feel and let ourselves be aware of what we need to be in order to let go of that illusion. I just see a lot of people walking around trying to be okay. If you stop trying to be okay and stop trying to be fine, and you let yourself feel everything that you need to feel, and you let yourself move through these challenges and say, okay, I don't resist it. I literally lie on the ground and I'm literally surrendered to whatever life has to give me via challenges or suffering. But I know that God is here with me. Something shifts. And then this new awareness, just like you had in Shavasana with the sound bowls, comes through and becomes embodied, which is like a gift that comes from the ether that you can take with you that shifts the physiology of your physical 3D body. It allows you to exist in a higher space that is in a vibration that isn't as sticky to those traumatic experiences. I guess
Mm.
it's hard to speak it because it's a little bit more challenging with the words. But frequency is either repelling or magnetic. So a frequency can magnify and attract something, and a frequency can also repulse. When we are true to our authentic heart, we become magnets for love and we repel what's not, and vice versa. If we feel fear and aversion and judgment, then we literally attract those experiences into our life continuously. So the authentic being is in flow, is in openness, is in surrender, is in the ability to be unafraid of feeling. I think that's what changed for me after I died, is unafraid to feel and to be.
You became authentic.
Yes.
When I decided to live authentically for me, I started to really, really find people that I connected with. I found so many people that were authentically living out their life as well. And that union of authenticity created bonds that I thought that I couldn't make as an adult. I thought that the purity of friendship existed only as children, and that it was so hard to make friends as an adult. I felt so alone. But embracing my authenticity completely changed that narrative. It was those thoughts that I was putting out, that frequency of, it's so hard. I'm, like, is there something wrong with me? Like, you can't make friends as an adult. Those thoughts were repelling my people. But when I embraced who I authentically was, it became magnetic. And now I meet people like you.
Because you know your puzzle piece, and then you can find your way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so funny. It's like we're all born with this puzzle piece or this, vibrational signature, and then we're afraid about it. We're afraid to show it. We're afraid of it ourselves, and we cloud it over with this veil of forgetting or this sleepiness or whatever, and then we can't find who we connect with because our puzzle piece isn't clear. We're like, it's not formed.
Mm-hmm.
Be who you're meant to be in this moment when you have love in your heart. And that's all you could be. And when we have challenges, we just accept them and we become one with that resistance in the sense of being like, okay, well, if this is something that God wants me to look at, to have more humility and to have more compassion, okay, I accept mission. I accept the mission. And then after the mission and the initiation is completed, we get another new part of our puzzle piece exposed. Our challenges obviously make us who we are, our experiences. It forms this authentic piece, dissolves that fabricated piece that we get when we go to school or we hang out with too many people that are not actually in that frequency. It's like we're like, no, that piece is not acceptable. So that's not an acceptable piece. This is not an acceptable piece. And then we don't know what we can accept and who we are. And then we don't know what we want. And then it all becomes that. So it's like uncovering these pieces are really accepting our challenges, accepting what God has given to us. And then when the piece comes clear, then say, okay, where does this piece fit? As in, how do I give the love that God gave me to somebody else? Like, where's my service fitting now?
Isn't that what you do for work now?
Yeah, I help people uncover their pieces, basically. In this physical incarnation, I help people align with the life, the truth, the love that has always been with them, that has been covered by all this illusion and the cloudiness, so that they can feel like they remember and they're empowered in that remembering of love. And after they have that, their gift to the world, their divine gift, their service, what they do in the world is like this automatic flowing river. And in that way, it is our purpose to be aligned with love in the distinct way that God made us, to help other people, but not in a savior position, to help people from who we are naturally, that flows within us. We chose that though before we incarnated into this physical body, whatever gift would help us to see God's light the clearest for our consciousness. So some people are like, want to be a builder and they want to help people build houses. Why? Maybe there's experiences that they will experience in this lifetime through building houses that will help them to awaken to a deeper form of God's love. It's not saying that it has to be in the workforce. It's not something that needs to be paid for. It's a divine gift that your own emanation of your essence can share with the world as a gift. So it's about sharing that gift. What is that gift? How does that gift form itself? What does that gift look like for this time? And then what are the lessons that that gift that you give to other people show you? Mm-hmm. So I help people step into sharing those divine gifts. And it has nothing to do with being lucrative. But what you get is an abundance of spirit. You get a new abundance of life. You get a purpose. You get an understanding of yourself from a deeper soul perspective.
That's beautiful. Well, we are a bit over our time, so we should wrap it up.
Good. Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and having this conversation with me.
Thank you again. Just for the persistence too, for waiting for the divine time. And it's August 7th, the day before the Lionsgate portal. This is 8/8.
Yes.
So it's good timing. It's Leo season. It's this time every year that I feel like is a very empowering time for us to realize our connection with the light.
My intention for tomorrow, and I mean, I'm definitely going to journal about it tonight, but my intention for tomorrow is to integrate and solidify the perspectives that I had in this conversation with you today.
Amazing. Cool.
All right. You have a good day.
You too, love.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. If you loved this episode, please consider leaving a review. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so we don't lose each other. And just share the link with somebody who can appreciate this message. Blessings to you all, and I hope to catch you on my next episode.